On President's Day, Aldrich Ames left his house in Arlington, Virginia, for the CIA headquarters in Langley. He was called in for an urgent meeting. But as soon as he was driving down the road, the car in front of him hit the brakes. Ames was forced to stop. Then, another two cars boxed him in from behind. He was trapped. Armed FBI agents rushed to his car and forcefully detained him as he shouted,
"You've got the wrong guy! I'm one of you!"
For the FBI, this was a jackpot. They have managed to capture the most damaging mole in the CIA at the time. But how could a man with more than 3 decades inside the CIA's Soviet Counterintelligence Division, a man responsible for exposing double agents, suddenly become one? How could the world's most powerful intelligence agency fail to see one of its own turning against it? Ames was born in River Falls, Wisconsin in 1941. His father was a lecturer at the University of Wisconsin, and his mother was an English teacher. In 1952, his father began working with the CIA's Directorate of Operations in Langley, Virginia. He was an alcoholic and spent most of his career at CIA headquarters in Langley. Due to his father's reputation, he worked for the CIA for 3 summers during his teens, paving the way for future recruitment. Back then, CIA staff could bring their family members in as summer workers, a common practice among trusted employees. So, young Aldrich, barely out of high school, found himself filing documents, printing counterfeit bills for the CIA's training project known as The Farm. Soaking in the quiet prestige of Langley's corridors, he was ready to serve his country. Aldrich had access to most of the CIA's unclassified files, which gave him a sense of power. He wasn't an agent yet, just an average kid surrounded by secrets. But it was here, during those 3 summers, that the seed was planted. At the time, the idea of making this his career barely crossed his mind. After those 3 summers, he knew every inch of the building. The place felt like home. What he didn't know was that one day, the same walls that welcomed him would watch him fall. Later, Ames went to the University of Chicago, where he planned to study foreign cultures and history. He worked and studied really hard, and this made him well known to the professors. But in his second year, Aldrich found that he loved the applause, the lights, the thrill of pretending to be someone else. He would skip classes to be on the stage and spent most of his time in this field. It was here that he learned how to act, how to make people trust you with their lives. 2 years later, with the help of his father's connections, Ames secured an entry-level position at CIA headquarters in Washington, D.C. He wasn't a spy yet. His first job was routine, translating cables, handling reports, and sorting field communications from overseas stations. He was surrounded by whispers of the Cold War, Soviet agents, defections, dead drops, all the things he had only heard about. But even from the corner of an office, he could feel the tension between the US and the USSR rising. Ames wasn't directly involved with the Soviets then. He was learning how the game was played. He absorbed how intelligence moved, how agents were recruited, and how double agents were caught. He watched senior officers talk about betrayals like chess moves. This quiet exposure fascinated him. The slow education built the foundation for the man he would later become. At the time, no one in Langley could imagine that the quiet young clerk with the stiff suit and calm manners would one day become the traitor they feared most. 5 years after beginning his work for the CIA, Ames completed a bachelor's degree in history at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He did not plan to have a career with the agency, but after attaining the grade of GS7 and receiving good performance appraisals, he was accepted into the Career Trainee Program, despite several alcohol-related brushes with the police. The CIA, known for extreme secrecy, kept Aldrich's drinking problems a secret. During this program, Aldrich met Nancy, a fellow CIA officer. They shared long hours of training, endless briefings, and late-night talks about work, dreams, and how dangerous the world outside really was. Somewhere between the long shifts and the quiet moments, they fell for each other. By the end of the year, they got married. two young agents who thought they could take on the world together. Not long after the wedding, Ames got his first real assignment in Ankara, Turkey. For Nancy, that meant giving up her own career. The rules were clear. Married officers couldn't serve together in the same post. Nancy made a sacrifice and walked away from the agency she'd worked so hard to join, while Ames boarded a plane to start his new life abroad. Ames's job in Turkey was to target Soviet intelligence officers for recruitment. In spite of this success, Ames's performance was rated only satisfactory. His superiors considered the spies recruited to be of sufficient value, but a remark was made that Ames was unsuited for field work, and it is recommended he spend the remainder of his career at CIA headquarters. Ames didn't give up and worked hard to gain his superiors' respect. He was particularly successful, but his excessive drinking problem was noted, making it impossible to climb the ladder. In 1976, Ames was assigned to New York City, where he handled two important Soviet assets. His performance was rated excellent, therefore. He received several promotions and bonuses, but still, he got no money. Busy thinking about his life, he once left his briefcase containing classified operational materials in the New York City subway. Fortunately, it was recovered by the FBI, but it wasn't unnoted. In 1981, Ames accepted a posting to Mexico City, while his wife remained in New York. His time in Mexico City didn't go as planned. The work was slow, and his drinking still a shadow he couldn't shake. He was lonely, restless, and far from home. Then he met Maria del Rosario, a cultural attaché at the Colombian embassy. She was elegant, warm, and everything Ames's life at that point wasn't. What began as a casual conversation over diplomatic events slowly turned into late-night dinners and secret meetings. At that time, any relationship of the agents should be reported, but even though most of his friends knew about this, he kept it a secret. Nancy didn't fight the divorce. She seemed relieved to let go. Soon after, Ames married Maria, the woman who had brought some light into his world. For 7 years, they lived peacefully, and Maria even gave birth to a boy. But Ames's drinking never truly left him. He never stopped drinking completely. By September 1983, he was reassigned to the Southeast Asia Division at CIA headquarters back in Langley. This wasn't just another desk job. Ames found himself in one of the most sensitive departments in the entire agency, Soviet counterintelligence. He had access to almost everything: CIA plans, operations, and names of agents working against the KGB and GRU. As a divorce settlement with his first wife, Ames agreed to pay all the debts that they had, and also provide Nancy with monthly support for up to 4 years. In the meantime, Maria had proved that she is also a big spender, going on shopping sprees and phoning her family in Colombia for $400 a month. Ames tried to convince his superiors of a promotion for several months, but denial was the only thing he got. He was desperate. Every cent mattered now. The rent was past due, his clothes were worn thin, and he could barely afford the basics for his family. Each morning, he'd put on the same faded suit, walk into Langley's marble halls, and pretend everything was fine. After some time, this resulted in him changing his ideology. He no longer viewed the Soviets as the enemy. Financial pressure was so intense that one night he'd had enough. Before going to bed, he wrote a letter to the KGB authorities. The next morning, he went to his office, took several highly classified documents on 10 U.S. assets inside the Soviet Union, hid them in his suitcase, and left for the USSR embassy in New York. There, he met a high-ranking KGB officer and simply handed him the documents, with a note demanding $50,000 in cash. The Soviets were surprised, but immediately approved the funding. 2 days later, Vitaly Yarchenko, the highest-ranking KGB officer ever to defect to the United States, upon arrival in Moscow, faced execution by a firing squad. The same fate was for Major General Dmitry Polyakov, the highest-ranking figure in the GRU, who gave information to the CIA from the early 1960s until his retirement in 1980. He was executed in 1988 after Ames exposed him. Polyakov was, without a doubt, the most important asset that Ames had compromised. Within weeks, more than 10 CIA's assets faced firing squads. The CIA was cornered. They knew that this could just be done from within, but blamed it all on another former CIA agent, Edward Lee Howard, who had also been passing information to the Soviets. Despite Ames's plan, this wasn't a one-time leak. He knew that the KGB wanted more. Ames had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. This frightened him. He knew sooner or later his cover would blow up, but the taste of money was something he wouldn't exchange. For months, Ames continued to feed the KGB a steady stream of classified documents for the promise of more than $2 million. Their primary method was that Ames would watch a mailbox across the street. If it had a chalked sign on it, he would drive to a nearby abandoned bridge and replace the files with a bag of cash. One by one, the CIA's top Soviet assets vanished. This kept on going until the CIA figured that all the assets that were compromised were the assets that only the Soviet counterintelligence department in Langley was responsible for, and no one else knew about. Ames was well aware of this fact, but his Soviet handler reassured his safety. In the meantime, Ames was enjoying a luxurious life that even his superiors only dreamed of. He would drive in fancy cars, a lavish lifestyle, when he was getting $60,000 from the CIA. Every time he was asked about his lifestyle, he would simply bring up his in-laws' fortune. He had also opened up a deposit in Swiss banks in the name of his mother-in-law. Due to serious suspicions about their department, the CIA chief commanded that every employee should take a lie detector test. This was more than enough to freak Ames out. He could lose his cover. So he tried to come up with a solution. The idea of defeating a machine was something he wasn't prepared for. He desperately got on the phone with his handler for instructions, but all he received was, "Sleep well and relax." Ames later confessed that this was the only thing he needed to remain calm during the test, and he also made a good impression on the examiner. During the test, he couldn't concentrate, but whenever the polygraph showed a lie, he would come up with explanations to perfectly get away with any suspicion. At the same time, Soviet KGB set up a false lead for the CIA and the FBI to secure their asset. This resulted in years of devastation for the CIA. Finally, the CIA chief made a quiet decision. They needed someone invisible and patient, who could work in the shadows unnoticed. That someone was Jeanette Vertefeuille, a quiet, sharp-minded veteran of Soviet counterintelligence. While others hunted glory, she hunted truth. Ames knew Jeanette Vertefeuille wasn't someone to underestimate. She had a sharp eye, the kind that never missed a detail. So, Ames tried to play it smart. He got closer to her and Lauer, her quiet shadow, offering his help with the investigation. But instead of earning her trust, it only made her more suspicious. Vertefeuille had a gut feeling the mole was one of their own, someone walking the same halls, drinking the same coffee. So she made a team of experts and began her investigations. Ames, on the other hand, didn't even bother shaking, suspicious of it. He continued with his luxury life and traveled with private jets. So Vertefeuille and her small team dug deep, through years of financial records from the Soviet embassy and every single transaction made by the CIA's Soviet counterintelligence staff. Her primary suspect was Ames, but she needed concrete evidence to prove that a high-ranking Soviet counterintelligence department in the CIA is a mole. This was months of work, but it didn't take them so long to find the truth. All the findings were handed to superiors. They ordered Ames's arrest, but it wasn't that easy. If he suspects any unusualness, he could hide in the shadows, and years of oppression would turn to ash. The CIA and the FBI knew that he kept most of the top-secret files in his house, so they didn't want to arrest him at the headquarters. They had no choice but to arrest the man in the middle of the road. On February 22, 1994, Ames and his wife were formally charged by the Department of Justice with spying for the Soviet Union and Russia. He pleaded guilty on April 28 and received a life sentence, with no chance for a parole. As part of a plea bargain by Ames, his wife received a lesser sentence of a 5-year prison sentence for tax evasion and conspiracy to commit espionage. In court, Ames admitted that he had compromised virtually all Soviet agents of the CIA and other American and foreign services known to me, and had provided the USSR and Russia with a huge quantity of information on United States foreign, defense, and security policies. It is estimated that the information Ames provided to the Soviets led to the compromise of at least 100 American intelligence operations and the execution of at least 10 sources. Ames's betrayal to the CIA also allowed the KGB to use controlled agents to feed the US both genuine intelligence and disinformation from 1986 to 1993. Some of this feed material was incorporated into CIA intelligence reports, several of which even reached 3 US presidents. Ames said he was not afraid of being caught by the FBI or CIA, but was afraid of Soviet defectors, saying, "Virtually every American who has been jailed in connection with espionage has been fingered by a Soviet source." Additionally, when asked about the polygraph tests, Ames said, "There's no special magic. Confidence is what does it. Confidence and a friendly relationship with the examiner. Rapport, where you smile and you make him think that you like him. Making the examiner believe that the exam has no importance to you seals the deal." The CIA faced massive criticism for not focusing on Ames sooner, given the obvious increase in his standard of living. Ames's attorney, Plato Kacharis, threatened to litigate the legality of the FBI's searches and seizures in Ames's home and office without conventional search warrants, but Ames chose to cooperate. Congress then passed a new law that granted specific power to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to authorize such searches. Ames was known to have compromised more highly classified CIA assets than any other officer until Robert Hanssen, who was arrested 7 years later in 2001. If you watched all the way till here, thank you. This is the second video of my channel, and I am more than happy that you found value or were entertained by my video. If you approve of what I do, consider leaving a like and subscribe. It would mean a world to me.